The Okeke household was a well-respected one in the city. Big gates, polished floors, a house that spoke of wealth and discipline. Yet beneath its fine curtains, storms were always waiting to rise. When Mr. Okeke brought a young man from the village, he introduced him not just as a helper but as a responsibility. "This is David," he said firmly, his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I promised his late mother I would look after him like my own. He will live here from now on." The family studied him. Tina, the gentle and soft-spoken one, smiled politely. She was always eager to please her father, always the calm spirit in the house. Vivian, however, leaned lazily on the staircase, chewing gum with a defiant smirk. Her eyes scanned David from head to toe, lingering on his broad chest, his strong arms. The look she gave him was not of a sister welcoming a brother, but of a woman undressing a man with her eyes. And then there was Mrs. Okeke. She stood quietly, her arms folded. One glance at Vivian's stare and another at David's nervous posture, and a chill went through her. She knew trouble when she saw it, and trouble had just been planted inside her house. David was shown to his room. Tina helped him unpack, arranging his few clothes in the wardrobe, chatting kindly about life in the city. He smiled shyly, grateful for her warmth. But just as Tina left, Vivian strolled in without knocking. She closed the door behind her, walked closer and whispered, "You look strong. I like that. My room, 9 o'clock tonight. Don't keep me waiting." David froze, his heart racing. Before he could reply, she winked and walked out, her perfume lingering behind. He sat on the bed, his mind spinning. Was this a test? Was she serious? That night, Vivian dressed in silk, waiting impatiently in her room. But David never came. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, choosing sleep over scandal. By morning, Vivian was nowhere to be found. She had stormed out to smoke with her friends, anger burning in her chest. Tina, however, walked David around the house, showing him the garden, the pantry, even the family library. She laughed softly at his village jokes, and he laughed too. Their bond felt easy, pure. But as night returned, the air in the house grew heavier. David thought he had escaped Vivian's trap. He was wrong. The house was quiet that night, the kind of silence that magnified every creak of the wooden stairs, every whisper of the wind. David lay on his bed half asleep, when the soft click of his door jolted him awake. Vivian slipped inside, her perfume arriving before her body did. She wore a thin silk robe that barely clung to her curves, the outline of her bare thighs shimmering under the moonlight. David sat up quickly, alarm flashing in his eyes. "Vivian, what are you doing here?" he whispered. She didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a finger to her lips. With one swift move, she shut the door, crossed the room, and climbed onto his bed. David's back hit the wall, his chest heaving. "Last night you ignored me," she murmured, her breath hot against his skin. "You won't do it again." Before he could protest, her lips crashed onto his. David's mind screamed to resist, but his body betrayed him. The taste of her mouth, the heat of her body, it was overwhelming. He groaned, grabbing her waist, pulling her closer, as though something deep inside him had been waiting for this. Their kisses turned frantic, hands exploring forbidden places. Vivian gasped as his strength met her hunger. She had wanted dominance, but David's raw passion flipped the night into his control. He pinned her gently, his kisses deepening, her robe falling carelessly to the floor. Time melted away as their bodies burned together in reckless need. The boy from the village had awakened a fire she didn't expect, and she moaned his name like a secret she never wanted to keep. By dawn, she slipped out of his bed, robe clutched in her hand, a satisfied smile curving her lips. She tiptoed back to her room, leaving David breathless, sweaty, and shaken. He lay staring at the ceiling, guilt gnawing at him. He had crossed a line he could never return from. Vivian was not just temptation anymore. She was his sin, his weakness. And unknown to him, this was only the beginning of nights that would ruin them all. The morning after his night with Vivian, David avoided everyone. He kept to his room, pretending to sleep, his mind replaying what had happened. Guilt gnawed at him, but so did desire. He hated how much he wanted her again. By afternoon, Tina knocked on his door. She peeked in with her usual gentle smile, holding a tray of food. "You didn't come down for breakfast. I thought you might be hungry." Her kindness disarmed him. Unlike Vivian, Tina's presence was soft, calming. She placed the tray on his table and sat at the edge of his bed, asking about his life back in the village. He found himself talking, really talking, about fishing by the river, climbing mango trees, and his mother's struggles before she died. Tina laughed at his jokes, her laughter like fresh water in his thirsty soul. Every smile she gave pulled him closer. She leaned in without realizing, her eyes shining, her lips so close to his he could feel her breath. And then it happened. Their lips touched. A soft, accidental brush at first, but then it deepened. David cupped her face, kissing her slowly, tenderly, nothing like the firestorm he had with Vivian. This was different, sweet, romantic, innocent. Tina's body trembled, her heart racing as though she had been waiting all her life for that moment. But just as quickly, reality crashed in. Tina pulled away, gasping, her hand over her mouth. She stood abruptly, her face flushed. I have to go," she stammered, running out of his room, her heart pounding with both guilt and joy. She rushed into her room, collapsing on her bed, giggling into her pillow like a girl who had just tasted love for the first time. She thought she had found the one. Little did she know, as her heart soared, Vivian was already planning another night in David's arms. David tried to sleep after Tina left, but his lips still tingled from her kiss. Her innocence had shaken him in a way Vivian's wildness never could. He lay restless, torn between guilt and desire, when his door creaked open again. This time it was Vivian. She slipped inside like she owned the night, her robe hanging loosely, her eyes blazing. Without a word, she climbed onto his bed, pressing her mouth hungrily against his. "You missed me yesterday," she whispered against his lips. "Not tonight." David groaned, torn between pushing her away and pulling her closer. But his body betrayed him, the heat of her touch unraveling every thread of self-control. Soon the room was filled with the sounds of their reckless passion, slow, wild, hungry. Vivian clung to him like she couldn't breathe without him, her moans filling the silence as they lost themselves in each other. By the time she slipped out, her hair messy, her lips swollen, David collapsed against the sheets, chest heaving, drenched in sweat. But the night wasn't done with him yet. Barely minutes after Vivian left, the door creaked again. David shot up, panic seizing him. He thought Vivian had returned. Instead, it was Tina, tiptoeing nervously, her nightdress brushing her ankles. She closed the door gently and sat on his bed, clutching her hands nervously. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, her voice soft. "I just wanted to talk." David swallowed hard, his heart racing. The scent of Vivian still lingered on him, his skin still burning from her touch. Yet here was Tina, innocent, glowing, her eyes full of trust. They talked, laughed, and every laugh pulled them closer until Tina's shyness melted. She leaned in, kissed him again, this time deeper, more desperate, as if she had been starving for him. David kissed her back, trying to silence the guilt that screamed in his chest. But when Tina suddenly pulled away, blushing, whispering, "Good night, David," before rushing out, he sat frozen in the darkness. Two sisters, two secrets, one bed. And David, trapped in the middle of a fire he had no way of controlling. Days turned into weeks, and David lived like a man walking on hot coals. By daylight, he kept to himself, avoiding family dinners, claiming he was too shy to sit at the long dining table. But by nightfall, his room became the most dangerous place in the house. Vivian was bold. She came whenever she pleased, draped in silk, lipstick smudged, her kisses fierce and demanding. She wanted him wild, reckless. Sometimes she dragged him into the kitchen for a hurried quickie against the counter, other times into the backyard where the night air carried her soft cries into the darkness. With Vivian it was always a storm. Chaotic, consuming, addictive. Tina was different. She came quietly, timid at first, just to talk. But their talks always melted into laughter. And laughter always led to kisses. When she touched him, it was with trembling fingers, with longing hidden behind her shy smiles. With her, David slowed down, savoring her innocence, making her feel cherished. It was gentle, romantic, a love she thought was pure. What neither of them knew was that they were sharing the same man, in the same bed, sometimes within hours of each other. David thought he was clever, keeping his walls high. But his guilt began to eat at him. Every time Tina smiled at him with trust in her eyes, he saw Vivian's hungry smirk behind it. Every time Vivian moaned his name in the dark, he felt Tina's soft whisper echoing in his ears. The lies grew heavier. He avoided the sitting room. He avoided Mrs. Okeke's sharp eyes, for she was watching more closely now. The boy she once thought was innocent had grown distant, secretive. And then, like thunder before rain, the first crack appeared. David was passing Tina's room one evening when he heard her sobbing. He pushed the door open slightly, concern etched on his face. She was curled on her bed, her shoulders shaking, her eyes red. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. Her face lifted, her cheeks wet with tears. And in a voice that cracked his chest open, she whispered, "David, I'm pregnant." The words hit him like a blow. His heart stopped, his throat dried. He staggered back, searching for air. Pregnant. Panic filled his bones. Before he could speak, Tina turned her face away, bitterness in her tone. "Just go. Leave me alone." David stumbled out, his mind in chaos. His secret nights with Vivian still burned on his skin, and now Tina's tears painted guilt across his soul. He lay awake all night, knowing the walls were closing in. The fire he had been feeding was about to burn the entire house down. Tina hid her pregnancy like a burning coal pressed against her chest. She wore loose clothes, claimed she was sick whenever her mother asked why she vomited in the mornings. Mrs. Okeke's eyes lingered on her, suspicious, but Tina refused every offer to visit the hospital. She convinced herself she could handle it, at least until she figured out how to tell David. But David was already slipping farther from her reach. Every night, Vivian stole him for herself. At first, she was careful, waiting until the house was quiet. But soon her hunger for him drowned her caution. Their secret became bolder. Stolen kisses in the kitchen, pressed against the pantry shelves, gasps muffled in the backyard where the night wind couldn't carry their sin far enough. "God, you make me crazy," Vivian moaned one night as David lifted her onto the kitchen counter. Her legs wrapped around his waist. Their bodies collided recklessly, pots rattling, spoons clattering to the floor. She didn't care. She wanted him everywhere, every way. And David, though guilt gnawed at him, couldn't resist her wild fire. It was intoxicating, addictive, dangerous. But fate chose the cruelest moment to bear the truth. That night, Tina left her room quietly, her throat dry, craving water. She padded barefoot toward the kitchen, humming softly to distract her nerves. The closer she got, the more she heard faint, breathless sounds that froze her mid-step. She pushed the door open a little, and the world around her shattered. David was there, shirtless, sweat glistening on his skin. Vivian sat on the counter, her robe pushed down, her nails digging into his back as she pulled him deeper into her. Their lips devoured each other, their moans filling the kitchen like a symphony of betrayal. Tina's heart cracked in two. Her hands trembled, her knees buckled. She bit her fist to stop the scream that rose in her throat. Without a word, without letting them see her, she backed away, tears streaming down her face. Back in her room, she collapsed to the floor, sobbing into her pillow until her chest ached. She clutched her stomach, the life growing inside her, torn between keeping it and ending it. How could she raise a child when the man she loved was tangled between her sister's thighs? That night, while David lost himself in Vivian's fire, Tina lay in the darkness, broken, bleeding inside, whispering to her unborn baby. Maybe it's better you never know your father. The Okeke home had grown tense, the air heavy with suspicion. Tina moved like a ghost, eyes swollen from nights of crying. Vivian glowed with reckless satisfaction, confident she had David wrapped around her finger. And David himself. He was crumbling inside, juggling lies that weighed heavier every day. It all came undone at dinner. Mr. Okeke insisted that everyone eat together for the first time in weeks. The table was long, polished, plates of steaming rice and stew set before them. David sat stiff, his eyes on his food, praying the evening would pass without incident. But fate had other plans. Halfway through the meal, Tina slammed her spoon down. Tears spilled over her cheeks as she stood, her voice trembling but loud. "I can't do this anymore. Daddy, I'm pregnant." The table fell silent. Forks froze in midair. Mr. Okeke's face went pale, Mrs. Okeke gasped, and Vivian smirked knowingly. All eyes turned to David. He dropped his spoon, his heart thundering. "Tina," he stammered. "It's not." But Tina cut him off, shaking her head. "It's not his. It's my ex. Before David ever came here, we had a goodbye and this." She pressed a trembling hand against her stomach. "This is the result." Gasps erupted around the table. Relief and shock collided in Mr. Okeke's expression. Vivian's smirk disappeared. And David sat stunned, the ground shifting beneath him. The room had barely settled when Mrs. Okeke suddenly swayed, her hand clutching her chest. I can't hide it anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked straight at her husband. "I'm pregnant too." The silence was deafening. Mr. Okeke blinked, confusion clouding his face. "Pregnant? Your age? How?" His voice trailed off, realization dawning like a curse. He turned slowly, his eyes landing on David, whose face was already drenched in guilt. "No," Mr. Okeke whispered, his hands trembling. "Tell me it isn't true." But Mrs. Okeke's tears said it all. She broke down, sobbing, her head bowed in shame. David sat frozen, caught in a net of his own sins, his tongue tied, his guilt spilling louder than any confession. Vivian rose from her chair, shock etched across her face. Tina covered her mouth, horrified. And Mr. Okeke, he stood slowly, his chair scraping against the marble floor, his rage filling the room. "You," he growled at David, his voice shaking with fury. "You disgraceful boy. You came into my house, and you lay with my wife." The table rattled as his fists slammed down. The house that once held secrets now trembled with revelations too poisonous to contain. And in that single night, David's world turned to ash. The house was in chaos after the confessions. Vivian screamed at David, calling him a liar, a thief, a coward. Tina locked herself in her room, her cries echoing through the night. Mrs. Okeke knelt on the floor, weeping, begging her husband to forgive her weakness. But Mr. Okeke's fury was a storm no one could calm. "You brought shame into my home," he spat, pointing at David with eyes that burned like fire. "You repaid my kindness with betrayal. You touched my daughters. And now my wife. God will punish you, but first I will." David dropped to his knees, his voice trembling. "Sir, please. I never meant." "Shut up," Mr. Okeke roared. His chest heaved as he turned to his wife, his voice laced with venom. "And you, carrying his bastard. You leave my house tonight. Both of you." Mrs. Okeke sobbed, crawling to his feet. "Please forgive me. I was lonely, I was weak." But his hands trembled with disgust as he pulled away. "Pack your things. You belong with him now. Since he has put you in the family way, let him take responsibility." And just like that, the judgment was passed. By morning, David stood at the gates of the house he once thought would be his salvation. Beside him, Mrs. Okeke clutched a small suitcase, her eyes swollen with tears, her belly already a curse that tied them together. The gates slammed shut behind them, cutting them off from the life of luxury forever. They returned to the village, not as saviors or family, but as outcasts. The villagers whispered when they passed, "That's the boy who lay with mother and daughters." Children pointed, women shook their heads, men spat in the dust. In their mud house, far from the marble walls of the city, David sat every evening on a broken stool, staring at nothing. Regret weighed heavier than hunger. Mrs. Okeke moved about slowly, her belly swelling, her face etched with sorrow. There was no love between them, only the chains of consequence. He had once been the boy full of promise, brought to the city for a better life. Now he was the man who ruined an entire family and destroyed his own future in the process. Every night, as crickets sang outside and silence pressed against the cracked walls, David closed his eyes and saw them all. Tina's innocent smile, Vivian's fiery eyes, Mrs. Okeke's trembling touch, and Mr. Okeke's face, twisted with betrayal. And he knew, with a certainty that burned in his bones, he would never escape the prison of his regret.